The NFL draft is upon us. Where are these Georgia Bulldogs going to land? We got some guys, first-round guys. Stetson Bennett, where's he going to land? All that with our guest, Joe Deleone, and Israel join us here in a little bit. This is Believe in Georgia Dogs on the Believe Network. Hey, welcome in. Happy Wednesday. The draft, it is draft eve. First round is tomorrow night. Lots of excitement in the NFL draft, not only with the Georgia Bulldogs, but a lot of teams have a lot of these top guys. Bama with Bryce Young, Kentucky with Will Levis, Florida with Anthony Richardson. A lot of guys around our league. The SEC has got a lot of intrigue in this draft. But on to tell us about a lot of that intrigue. We had him on for Senior Bowl, post-Senior Bowl. We're going to kind of see how that shakes out tomorrow night, Friday, and Saturday in the NFL draft. It's Joe Deleone. What's up, Joe?
Man, it feels like so long ago after we talked about the Senior Bowl. A lot has changed. And even for the top guy that I know that we're going to dive into in Jalen Carter. But, man, I'm excited. Draft is coming so close. You spend all this time in this whole process getting ready, and it's all going to come to fruition this Thursday.
Absolutely. And man, I can't wait because there's some surefire first rounders with Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, probably Broderick Jones. But then there's a couple other fringe first round guys that I'm seeing. Some mocks have them in the first, some mocks have them in the second with Kelee Ringo and Darnell Washington, and then Chris Smith, things like that. But let's start with Jalen Carter, the obvious surefire top 10 pick. Had some legal issues during the combine. Seemed to have put that in his rear view. Has had some really good meetings with some of these teams. Most recently, the Atlanta Falcons. Where do you project Jalen Carter? Does this legal stuff drop him a little bit, or did it really matter in the grand scheme of things?
I think it does definitely drop him, and I think it's less to do with the legal matter and more to do with the maturity concerns for a player like this and the things that he was surrounded by. And I'm sure that these NFL teams that are considering taking him in the top 10 have done more than their due diligence to know what his involvement was. I think the other aspect of this now comes into his pro day performance, where he showed up out of breath and he was not in the best of shape with his shirt off. And a lot of people were saying that doesn't really look like he was in shape for that workout. Other people that you kind of heard talking about that pro day were saying that, well, they had him running from drill to drill, so he was out of breath. But I acknowledge that I think he's going to slide out of consideration for the top defensive player. But beyond that, I don't see him making it past the 5th or the 6th pick, or maybe even as far as 7 or 8. Like, that's the absolute furthest I see him going. And I think that the Seahawks will be a perfect destination for him, get him as far away from the South as possible, as far away from Georgia, in a situation where he's on a well-coached team and all he's going to be focusing on is football. There's nothing fun to do in Seattle. It's raining all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get him distracted. And then the other possible spot for Jalen Carter is the Detroit Lions at 6. I was on a Lions podcast, and they made a not the best of jokes, but they're like, well, there's no roads to race on in Detroit, so he might be fine. And not the greatest joke, but again, you're getting away from putting him into a spot where he's on a well-coached team, a disciplined team, and that I really do think that either of those spots are going to be great for him. He's going to be such a talented player. He just needs a little bit of time. And I think that we need to give him that time to grow up and be an adult. We all did stupid stuff when we were younger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's learned from it. And thankfully it wasn't worse for him than it was with the conclusion of those legal matters. And if you want to hear more about that, we did some shows, Israel and I, previous on that. So I'm not going to hash on that too much. Is there going to be any teams that trade? Is there potential teams that are interested that will possibly trade in? Like I've heard the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers as a possibility. Any of those teams, scheme fit wise, or that you've heard or seen that might trade in to like 6 or 7 to grab Jalen Carter?
Yeah, I think that trade in is certainly a possibility. And I, to be frank, if the Philadelphia Eagles end up scooping up Jalen Carter, that is going to be so frightening to then repair Jordan Davis, Kobe Dean, and Jalen Carter. And it's just another one of those, the rich get richer. And it's annoying as a Giants fan to know that the Eagles are in such a position that they can do something like that, and that they're going to probably come away with a pick at 10 that is going to bolster them a ton, even though they already have a really good roster. But no, I absolutely believe though that somebody could trade up if he does make it past 8. I don't think the concern is enough for him to slide out of the top 10.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think so either. It's just going to be one of those teams. I mean, the Falcons may not let him get past 8 if that's the case. I sure as heck think Philly's going to have to trade up from 10 if they're going to have a chance at him. But another guy that I think, before we get to that, we are presented by Betonline.ag. Silly me, I forgot to include them on that. They're the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. If you want to bet on the NFL draft, Will Levis's odds just changed thanks to Reddit. Bryce Young, where does he end up? You can bet on all of that at Betonline.ag. All you got to do is head to the website, or you can do this on your phone or your mobile device, and type in the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get that 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online is where the game starts. So Nolan Smith, somebody that had some injuries. You know, we did like a February draft review of Nolan Smith, Israel and I, and we determined that whatever team's going to get him is going to be lucky to have such a versatile pass rusher, somebody that's really strong in the run game. Is the shoulder injury going to be a concern as a rookie for Nolan Smith? Is that going to affect his draft stock? I don't think it really matters where he gets drafted. I think he's going to ball out when he's fully recovered from that shoulder injury.
Yeah, I don't think that the injury is going to negatively impact him too much, just for the sake of he's had such a long window of recovery. And I think where he ends up landing in the back end of the first round, it has more to do with just his projection. And then on top of that, the current ranking of where the other guys sit on a lot of other people's boards. And a lot of times when you have these guys that get injured during the season, you don't get enough games out of them. It's a lot of what have you done for me lately? And we're going off of what have the guys done recently that are ahead of him done. And there's a lot of guys like Tyree Wilson and Lucas Van Ness that have surged up boards, and Nolan Smith has kind of stayed stagnant of where the expectation was of him coming into the season. I also will say him not having a lot of sack production, I think that's where some of the concern comes in, but a lot of creative defensive coordinators, to your point, very explosive athlete. I think he can move well enough to play in space, but for as fast as he is to basically just be able to run around guys, that's not going to work in the NFL, but you refine his technique, you refine his pass rush moves. I think he could be a very dangerous player. For whatever reason, he feels like a Baltimore Raven, and I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up with the Ravens. But Nolan Smith, very, very talented player that could end up in that back end of the first round.
Yeah, I could see any one of these odd front teams jump up and nab him. Now, speaking of odd front teams that can jump up and nab a defensive player, Kelee Ringo, where does he fit? Because again, his season was up and down. He had some really, really good moments. Picked off Will Levis in a game momentum swinging interception on the road at Kentucky. He's had some moments this season where it didn't look like he was going full throttle, or whatever the case may be. He's a fringe first rounder. I've seen him projected early second round as well. Where does Kelee Ringo fit in this thing?
Yeah, I think Keely's stock has really shifted since the beginning of the season. I think a lot of people were saying to themselves, wow, this is a former highly recruited kid, very, very explosive athlete. But we kind of got better perspective on his testing numbers, and you do see some of those deficiencies in his numbers show up on tape. I don't think he changes direction very well. I also think that his reaction time isn't great. And I think compared to some of these other guys that were a little bit more consistent in Deonte Banks, Joey Porter Jr., Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, he for me is that fifth guy. I think with the talent at this corner class, he could be a late first rounder, could be an early second rounder, as you said, but realistically is probably going to be one of the later guys in the top 5 of these corners to be selected. Yeah,
absolutely. And, I noticed that on I was watching Anthony Richardson's tape actually, and there was a few deep balls that he threw to CJ Henderson where it just didn't look like Kelee Ringo reacted fast enough. Is there things that, projection wise or potential wise, that teams will like a lot with Kelee Ringo to maybe get him into the first round, or is he just kind of second round or day two kind of guy, and he's just going to get on a roster and develop?
I think a lot of guys are going to love the size and the speed. Like, I think a lot of teams are going to get excited about that. And when you can't really find a lot of corners that can move as quickly as him, accelerate as easy as he can. It's kind of funny when you watch him because he closes down gaps really quickly because of his speed. He just doesn't change direction well enough that you can be as excited about him as you would be some of these other prospects. But I think that is what is attracting NFL teams to maybe take him as a late first rounder, is that speed. And he's got a really big frame. He's a really big corner for a team that I think is maybe looking for a cover, a zone corner. That's what's going to really be what is going to be attracted for a guy like Keely Ringo.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think people get enamored with that 40 time, and they can work on the change of direction. They can work on ball skills and things like that. These coaches do absolutely amazing things with those guys at this level. But size, speed, Darnell Washington, he's a mountain of a man. Agent Zero is what they called him. I've seen him early second round. I've seen Jaguars as a potential fit. The Cincinnati Bengals could be a team that could go get Darnell Washington. He's kind of that interior piece that they may need to complete their offense. Where do you see somebody like him fitting, and what about Darnell Washington really excites NFL teams?
Yeah, the size and the blocking ability that he brings to the table, being 6'8" and 260 plus is massive. There's not a lot of tight ends in the NFL that can be built like him and then also move like him. He's also got really big, strong hands, as we saw at the combine, and then we also saw in some of his highlights this season. I think a lot of teams are going to be hoping for that upside. I think the one good thing about Darnell Washington is what his floor is. This past year for Georgia, he was the best second tight end in college football. And I don't think there's a reason why, at the bare minimum, Darnell Washington can't be the best second tight end in the NFL if that's what he becomes. I don't know, because we don't have enough evidence to say that Darnell Washington can be a full-time number one go-to tight end, because we just don't have evidence of that. He's always been the secondary option to Brock Bowers, but man, he's got the traits to do it. I have him as my third tight end in the class. And I think he's just got so much potential because of that size, the power. He just does everything really, really well. And at the very least, you get a nice red zone threat that's an extra offensive lineman.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, some of the catches he made in space on throws that probably should have been overthrow interceptions, he plucks them out of the air just because he looks like an NBA player. So I think
like an alley-oop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a team like Cincinnati, when you have all this attention on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, that's somebody in the red zone that he's pretty sneaky now, and they've never had a guy like that. Or if you want him as a number two, maybe Baltimore goes up and gets him and pairs him up with Mark Andrews, or for Jacksonville, because Evan Ingram's on a 1-year deal, maybe they get him and just kind of pair those guys up, because Evan Ingram's not necessarily an inline blocking guy like Darnell Washington can be, and they can run a lot of 12 personnel. So I really like the versatility of what Darnell Washington brings to the table. I think a lot of teams are going to benefit heavily from having him on their roster.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where the attraction comes from, is that, again, the floor is so high that you're going to, at the very least, get a great blocker. So these teams are going to be saying to themselves, look, if maybe he doesn't pan out as a go-to full-time production guy that is as productive as we're hoping, at least we're getting a really nice piece to this roster. And I think that realistically, he's probably going to be more of a second-round pick for that reasoning. But I don't think he falls further than day two if he does somehow slide.
Yeah, I mean, I think worst case scenario, late second rounder. Yeah, if there's a run of offensive linemen or defensive guys, I mean, I think this is a pretty defensive and upfront heavy draft, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of great defensive talent, but there's also a lot of tight end talent. So I think that if a run does start on the tight ends, it could incentivize teams in the second round to say, oh crap, we got to go get our guy. We got to go get the, one of the tight ends that we really like if they maybe miss out on somebody else. So if we do end up with a Dalton Kincaid and a Luke Musgrave going ahead of him, I think teams are going to be rushing to move up to maybe go get him or just running to the podium with a pick to take Darnell Washington.
Broderick Jones, speaking of upfront talent, I mean, one of the more athletic tackles in this draft, seeing him run out and block guys in space on screens, pulling, things like that, just demolishing edge guys, demolishing interior guys, just the size and strength that he brings to the table. Where do you see him landing?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a top 20 pick. I think with the way that this tackle class is unfolding, there's just not a lot of top end talent. And I think what you get with Broderick Jones, awesome wide base. He plays with the best base maybe out of any of these offensive tackles. He moves so well, kind of like a basketball player playing defense, the way he moves with his feet. I think he just needs to add a little bit more strength to his upper body, a little bit more bulk to his upper body. He's a little bit lean up top, but the guy moves just so well. And I think that a lot of teams that see a guy like that and are going to say, let's bulk him up. Maybe his first year, he's still figuring things out a little bit. He's getting a little more comfortable. He's getting strong enough to deal with these power rushers, but wow, Broderick Jones can be a very, very talented left tackle or even right tackle in the NFL.
I don't doubt it. Just the way he moves. So we only got you for a few more minutes, and God, we have 3 minutes and way more than 3 prospects to cover here. But we're going to rapid fire this thing. Stetson Bennett, day 3. What's going on with him? Is he taking a hit? Or is he going to get drafted? Where does he?
Yeah, Stetson's strange to really figure out, and I'll try not to be too negative as I've always been on Stetson Bennett, but you get the folks in the media, and it's a lot of former GMs who prop him up as this great backup who could prove everybody wrong, and it's going to be like a total steal. And then there's others that are like, why would I waste my time with a guy who's 25 or so that's doing these dumb things off the field? And like that video of him for the drunken disorderly is not great. And I don't know, all this stuff and the way that he's handled himself is a little bit questionable. I think that realistically, the way that it's kind of countered itself here, and it's kind of like a cancelization of won the national championship, the hype was high for him, and then it got canceled out by the off the field stuff and getting arrested. So it's now back to what his stock probably normally would have been if he had a normal college football season, didn't win the national championship, wasn't a Heisman finalist, where early to late day 3 pick. It's probably where he's going to go.
Chris Smith.
I still really like Chris Smith. I was really disappointed with the testing numbers. Did not test well, but man, he's just such a smart football player, such a smart football player. And Kirby loved him. And I think for that reason, like you kind of got to trust a guy like Kirby Smart and the attraction to a guy like Christopher Smith. I'm sure that the reviews have been glowing. Maybe he's like I think he's Ryan Roberts, my co-host, has said he's like Rodney McLeod is a really good comparison for him. So could be a really, really nice player in the NFL.
Just a heady player, just going to be in the right place at the right time. He's going to be one of those that he's going to play well despite his testing numbers. He's just always going to be in the right position. He's the no-name boring superstar. But Joe, it's I know you got to run. You're probably in a million different places, a million different times. Yeah, you're probably going to grow roots in that studio by the time this thing's over with all the appearances you're making around the network. So we definitely appreciate you coming on board here. If you haven't caught on to the Believe Network, it's growing like wildfire. We're everywhere. We're on just about every TV network, and we're going to continue to be. We're just going to have our own channel everywhere. We got to reach out to Comcast and DirecTV Stream, and let's get the big boys out there, and let's get our own network here. And this is going to be a lot of fun. So this journey is still going, still skyrocketing. Joe Deleone does a lot of great things around the network. Ruffino and Joe show, the first team, and then your NFL draft stuff with Ryan Roberts. And you are the number one utility guy, is what I'm learning as well. You're on every show about every topic. So great to have you, Joe, man. I appreciate you coming on board. I'll save your voice for the next host, and we'll talk at you later. We'll recap these things afterward at some point when the dust settles, and just kind of see how these teams did and kind of see where everybody landed. So
for sure, of course. Thanks, Corey.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it.
Do you believe?